and I'll show you how you catch the bug, so you girls out there can keep your husbands away from doing that. It's very expensive, and it's the hardest work you'll ever do in your life. So I think Brock's ready upstairs, and we're going to start off, and I'm going to talk a little bit as the videos go on. But first of all, we all know that there's a lot of Corvette race cars, and Corvettes are racers for a reason. First of all, they look really cool, and second of all, they have a lot of advantages that come in a good package for a production-based car. There have been many different types of race cars based on the Corvette. And I'll tell you what, Brock, pop that other one in there real quick, the one that's in the case, that other DVD. Not sure if we got just the right one in there or not. Anyway, Corvettes have been a favorite of racers for many years, and some of the reasons for that are that they make great performance cars to start with, and they have a lot of superior traits that are inbred from the very beginning. As you all know, the Corvette started out in the 50s, very quickly gained a V8 engine, and very quickly 4-speed transmissions, and very quickly independent suspensions. And because of that, along with their aerodynamic designs, their superior braking, and most of that was all due to their weight advantage of being fiberglass. But one of the biggest attributes to the Corvette as being a race car was the fact that they were the best bang for the buck. They still are. You can go out and buy a production car, new or used, and you can find a way to race it just like the guys did today at the autocross in a parking lot. One of the other, the unique suspension being the double A arm and the independent rear, semi-independent rear, I should say. Now we get back to some of the pictures of the race cars. As you can see, there have been many shapes and sizes. Every race car that is built unique, except for if you're in a challenge series or something where all of your cars must be the same. What happened was the Corvette was so good that a lot of the sanctioning bodies forbid it from racing in their series. And along came a guy by the name of John Powell, and he proposed, well, why don't we go race the Corvettes all by themselves? And he made it to General Motors, and they listened to him, and he came up with the idea of race on Sunday and sell on Monday. So he asked that Chevrolet participate, and they agreed. They came up with the Corvette Challenge Series. It was worth $1 million. Enjoy this one. This is some of the best Corvette racing.
In 1957,
that there ever has
Chevrolet
been.
forged a new chapter in the annals of motorsport. The Corvette SS, born of a desire to be America's first true racing machine, to be innovative in design, engineering, and style, to be world class, and to make the definitive statement that the guys from Chevrolet can package power as well as anybody. The Corvette SS established the pedigree and wrote the prologue to the incredible Corvette racing history that is still very much a work in progress. It said Chevrolet is a force to be reckoned with. And here we are more than 30 years later with a new series, one steeped in that rich racing tradition, one born of the same desires as was the SS, one which celebrates the legacy of Corvette. Corvette is not merely a force to be reckoned with, but the single most awesome showroom stock race car of all time. A machine so awesome, it attracts the top guns of American motorsport.
All of this action will be right on that television screen. Around this course, we'll give them a round of applause. of applause. They did a tremendous...
Corvettes are born in Bowling Green, Kentucky. 25,000 deliveries a year of America's only world-class sports car. The Challenge engines are built at the Flint, Michigan engine plant. This is the same place, Jim, that Chevy NASCAR bow tie engines are made. The equalized and sealed Challenge engines are sent to Corvette Challenge headquarters at Powell Development America in Wixom, Michigan. There, hand-picked craftsmen and women work for 2 days on each Corvette Challenge car, producing the race conversion.
Now, we're going to have to speed this up for you to show everything that goes into the Corvette Challenge race conversion, and this is interesting, John. Let's start at the top.
Billy Powell from California puts together the roll cage. He bends the tubes, assembles them. Boy, Jim, if he could work that fast, can you imagine how much money we could make?
They don't roll off quite this fast, do they, John? But as I say, it's a little speed and tempo, but boy, they get the work done.
Billy Powell is meticulous in his work, and you can see from the attention to detail. Dan Stein installs the onboard fire system and puts in the ATI Challenge racing seats. You know, some of these racing modifications are strictly for the racetrack. Corvette is already one of the strongest and safest cars on the road.
Because the old stock engine, John, it comes out.
Dan Stein and Tom Spiz now install the sealed Corvette Challenge power plant. This small block Chevy puts out 300 horsepower with the catalytic converter removed for racing. The car is finally lifted up by Lee Caldwell, and the brake ducts are installed, brake cooling, and all suspension components are sealed. We then drive it out, Jim, for delivery to a happy Corvette Challenge racer.
This is not a forgiving track.
Now this track is no room for errors. Boy, it'll reach out and bite you.
Hang on, Canada. The best of America returns in the more than $1 million Corvette Challenge. This circuit is...
Doug Rippey and his team dominated that series, 88 89, and in 89 they took home not only the $1 million, but about $600,000 per race, for all the races they won. His driver was Bill Cooper, who I met a couple years later. Rippey needed a new challenge, so he started investigating going to World Challenge. He did, he won it. They started hand-capping again. GM pulled their support. So Rippey decided that he needed something new, bigger, and better. He was in the middle of building a car when one of his employees told him that they knew somebody at the FIA, and that is the governing body of automotive racing in Europe, and it also governs the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So Rippey decided to go there. He had a customer who was going to build a car, and then he was going to take the car to Le Mans. The rules say you have to start out with a stock frame or frame rails, and you have to have a stock suspension points. So you're going to watch this car go together, and Rippey's way of doing it, which is a little different. Naturally, you don't have the car built, you're already working on the motor, if you're a motorhead. You notice this car has that's an old Corvette Challenge front end, but he actually pulled the molds from someone who had this body custom made, and he liked it so much that he had these molds loaned to him where he could lay them up with fiberglass. You'll notice some familiar parts on this car, including the LT5 engine. It's not as easy to build a car as one might think. The specifications are exacting. At 200 plus miles an hour, even being off a fraction of an inch can cause a catastrophe. Notice the state-of-the-art dyno at Rippey's place. The little boat throttle thing there. built these engines, dyno tested them, and actually went through 2 successful 24-hour tests. The only problem was before he took them to Le Mans, he made some changes. You notice all the exacting angles, the amount of work, steel, welding. There's a compromise between the lightness of a vehicle and the safety of that vehicle. Safety comes first. You watch the car actually come through the construction process. Chrome wheels are very important, ladies. All Corvettes have to have chrome wheels. Now this is a state-of-the-art exhaust system and hanger. You'll notice. All dyno work had to be done after 9 o'clock when his neighbors were not there. So there's the state-of-the-art dyno. And there's the car body parts assembled. One of the things you think about when you build a race car is that you have ease of serviceability. In other words, you have to take off very little to get to what you want to service. In this case, you had to take off the doors to get the engine out because the exhaust went through the doors. So it was really kind of tough. But you're going to see this car come together. And sometimes when you want to go test the car, it's I'll wait till this gets over. All right, 556 on that run. That was one of the first 385 LT5s ever built. Doug was proud of his car, and we couldn't really afford to go test this car at a racetrack. You have to rent the whole track, so we entered the 12 hours of Sebring for like $1,500, and we used it as a test session. Unfortunately, the car only made about 3 laps with some engine problems, which you'll see, but it looked really cool. You'll notice the blue smoke coming out the back of the car as it made one of its few passes down the straightaway. So it was back to the drawing board. Well, we tested, we got ready, and Rippy said, let's go to Le Mans. So we packed up all of our stuff, and we had no clue what we were getting into. We were going to the biggest racing event in the world. This is the biggest racing event in the world. All of Europe participates. Most every automotive manufacturer in the world participates. They have parades for the drivers. They have parades for the little girls. Everyone has a flag of their country, and this is all before the race. You don't want to know what happens if you win this race. All the money in the world will not guarantee you a win in this series. 24 hours of the hardest durability testing that anybody, anywhere has ever done. There was the result of 3 laps. So we had a spare motor, but it was broke. Rippy asked me what we should do, and I said, well, let's tear 2 apart and make 1. We had a gynecologist with us. I worked on one, he worked on the other. We made it 12 more hours on the track. So we came home from Le Mans, and I was bitten by the bug. We had the only American flag in the entire paddock area on the garage. No one else was. Callaway was there, he had a German flag. So all of a sudden, I got mad, and I kept calling Rippy and asking him where GM was. Why were we the only American flag? a farm boy from Minneapolis, and he said, well, if you don't like it, what are we going to do about it? And I said, I don't know. Let's go tell him. He said, well, I think I can get us an appointment. He called me several days later, and he said, guess what? On November 27th, we have an appointment with General Motors at the Warren Tech Center. And we're going to be there and give our presentation, now get it done. So I worked on it, and we got a nice presentation with a little video. We walked in at 9:30 in the morning for our 30-minute visit with Mr. Hill and Mr. Allman, Mr. Fischel, John Heinersee, Gib Hufstetter, and a whole bunch of folks. And so I was a little intimidated, I'll have to admit, but we came there to give them our message, and our message was, you're not a world-class sports car if you don't race with the world. You're not even going to be America's sports car, because the Viper's racing and they're going to steal it from you. Needless to say, I had all of their attention, and I drove in the point that Viper was going to take over. They were already taking over, and if Corvette didn't do anything about it, they were going to be out. And I got them so worked up that they were starting to commit right there in the meeting, which took 2 hours rather than 30 minutes. So when Herb Fischel said, let's do this thing, and Dave Hill said, let's talk, and said, thank you very much, and we left, Ribby got outside and gave me a big hug. He said, you know what you just did? And I said, no. But I couldn't believe that I was walking into Chevrolet headquarters telling them they were doing the wrong thing with the Corvette. So later on, about 3 weeks later, we got this package in the mail, and it was a really nice poster that they made for us. And the letter said, congratulations, we've decided we're going to honor your idea, only we're going to use some in-house talent, and that was Pratt & Miller. So we didn't get to do it, but we weren't brokenhearted. The fact was they were going to go racing. So then we thought, well, what are we going to do? And we talked on the internet, the ZR-1 list in the early days. Somebody said, let's go racing. Somebody else said, let's go racing. The next thing I know, I said, let's go racing. Money started coming in. Sponsors started calling. And before we knew it, we were going to build a race team. Now, we had never done this before. We didn't know what we were doing, but we were in for a complete education.
Love it when it's small, wide. Love it when it's fast. Love it when the leader's calling, pack is moving past. Love it when they're making lots and lots of noise. Can't wait to hear these nobles say, let's go racing, boys. Let's go racing, boys.
Well, the first thing you need when you go racing is a car. So we looked all over for a car, and somebody said, Ken Baker has a car. In fact, it's a ZR-1. So we called Ken, and he said, baby, I got just what you need. I'll send you some pictures of this car the last time it was raced. I'll sell you the car, and I'll even throw a bunch of parts in.
Let's go racing, boys.
Look at this baby.
Let's go racing, boys.
Ken was so nice. He threw all the parts in we could use in the front seat. The car wasn't exactly as it looked in those pictures. In fact, we come to find out later that it was borrowed and never returned from General Motors. So we decided we had a stolen race car. Now the wiring was fantastic. Even Doug Rippey had to check it out a couple of times. Brakes were less than exotic. The dash was functional, I guess. And Rippey says, what in the world did they do this for? Well, we fit an LT5 in there, figured out it would work, started the process of bringing this car back to life. A new fuel pump, added a few things, repainted the whole roll cage assembly, put all new body parts on. It started to look like a Corvette. We decided to leave it white because white cars are much easier to fix, I found out later. And we came up with the name Pirate Racing, based on the fact that we had no factory support. And the most famous individualists in all of history were pirates. They sailed the seas without a country on their ship. So we became the Pirates.
As we mentioned,
Barry Borschler got the top qualifying time by about a half second. That's a lot in this category. Cunningham Baker,
Our second race, we decided to put Kim Baker in the car.
You know, what you're looking at is the
And Kim took the wheel and qualified third.
They are making their way into what is called West Bend right now.
And this is what happened, and this was the turning point of pirate racing.
A couple of fairly significant names. Tommy Baker back there a little bit. So he's got... We are watching. T1 has picked up the green. We think the pace car's up. There they go. And Borschler, it was really a foregone conclusion. He was going to bring them down slow because that Saline Mustang had oodles of torque compared to that Acura SX. And Cunningham, as we suspected, wasn't able to run with it.
Now you see the second group of cars coming down the straightaway. There were 80 cars on the track at one time. The GT group went by, and then the T1 group came by.
Through the West Bend now with a diving turn, and already you can see Borschler and Cunningham have stretched it out a little bit. Kim Baker there in third, and he's got a bit of a margin. And we're already starting to see some gaps building. And one of the things this season, Mercy, I think is big fire. That is Baker's car.
And he's getting now. You see the window net out already. That car is completely engulfed under the car. Getting in the grass right there is putting the flames out. That's a good thing. They must have had an oil line or fuel line come off because that was burning quite heavily under them.
Now the problem was is Kim pulled over on the far side of the track, and the fire department was on the other side of the track.
It's a good sign.
Still
And before anybody could get to the car with the fire extinguishers, we had to wait for all those cars to go by.
He may have had some hot fluid spraying on him as well, so I'm trying to deal with that. Boy, you can't see the car. That's black oil smoke. Let's take a look. Watch it as they come down through that diving turn doors.
Well, it's happening already. Look back to the third car, Corvette, burning heavily underneath in the middle of the oil pan. Now, that could be a blown motor. That could be an oil line, gas. We don't know at this point in time. But if there's any cracks or any holes in the bottom of that car, and that's fluid, you're right, Greg. It would have got inside the race car with him, and you can tell it must have because he's wanting out and wanting out right now.
Yeah, big hurry. And this points out these cars start as a stock production car, but they are heavily modified, and there's some pretty trick stuff going on inside. Look at that. That is just engulfed right now. Baker's up. He looks like he's okay talking to them, to the officials over there. That's one of the nurses. But that car, that car is really burning right now.
Yes, it is indeed. You see Kim Baker, he looks okay. You don't see any char marks on his driver's suit. They turn brown when they have burnt it all. Now they've got the chemical extinguishers and the water going on there. That will put that car out. Now what caused the fire we don't know at this point, but obviously it's a flammable fluid of some sort.
You know, they say the only press is no press.
There is a little bit of a scorch
look on his leg there, on his right leg. You can see he's turned the driver's suit. It's cinched the driver's suit, so he did have flame up inside the cockpit with him.
There's the reason for the yellow. You can see the white car, the Corvette of Kim Baker, and this is what prompted it all.
On the downhill, we don't see what happened. We already know there is a lot of fire underneath that car as something is broken, an oil line, maybe a blown motor.
We had about 100 Corvette enthusiasts on the hill watching this race. Most of them were taping it themselves.
Kim Baker wants out now.
And
he's still running.
as you'll see, they weren't gentle with it, bringing it back to our
He
paddock.
gets off in the grass, and you pointed out that seemed to maybe at least snuff the fire a little bit, and he'll be able to get out, but as he gets out, he immediately starts rolling around, and we saw the side of his leg. He did get a little scorched there, so a nice move. The fire is out. You can see there's an awful lot of extinguishant dripping off the car as they're pulling it off. The brakes work.
Well, he had a singe mark on his right thigh, right next to where the shift lever was, which leads me to believe that whatever fluid it was burning came up through the shift tunnel by the shift lever and got into the car from there. And of course, it singed his right leg, and we haven't heard from Kim, but he walked off on his own, and that looks good.
Well, at this point, you would suspect he would have been chatting with his crew chief, and that gentleman is standing by with John Bizignano. Biz?
Well, we are with Jim Van Dorn. He wasn't chatting with his crew chief because he was trying to get out of the car so fast. But Jim, why such a big fire?
Well, we're not sure. Something might have let go of the engine. We're going to have to go back and take a look at it. We've had no problems like this at all. No leaks all weekend. Everything's been real good. So we'll have to go back and take a look at the Les Stanford Chevrolet Corvette and see what's going on.
Had you been working on the oil lines or the fuel lines? Did you change a carburetor or anything like that?
Everything was real great. SCCA wanted to do a routine check of the throttle body. That was fine, and put everything back together. And there's no reason for it right now. But we're going to go look at the Les Stanford Corvette ZR-1 and see what we can find out on it.
Talk to your driver yet?
Driver looks to be okay. Kim's okay. We'll wait for him to come out and then we'll walk him back.
Kim looks a lot better than the car, guys.
As you can imagine, this was pretty devastating, and we'd already been through our budget, and we couldn't afford to go back to Rippy's, and we didn't know what we could afford to do. So I walked back to the paddock and everybody was standing around, some were crying, everybody had their head down, and I said, guys, how are we going to get to the next race unless this car is ready to go? And they jumped up and grabbed glass cleaner and Q-tips, you can name it, and you'll hear later when they say that this is the end of the race. And by the time this race was over, this car was gutted and cleaned and ready to go in the track.
The last time around, the 49.8
You'll notice the fire was pretty comprehensive. On the way back to the pits, we even tipped over our toolbox.
The checkered flag is up. The lead. Which blessing I might be saying? Am I leading? Yeah. That's it. Got you. It's Grand Prix here at Lime Rock. 1 p.m. to do. 207 is the official start time.
So we didn't know what we were going to do. And a few of the guys came over and we talked and tried to figure it out. And we were going to haul it all the way back to California, and then we thought about it. And you notice the date was 5/24. I asked Kim, I said, why don't you just pull the fire bottle? He said, well, does it work? And I said, of course it works. He said, well, when I owned the car, he said, I took the gauge apart, bent the needle over to the full mark because I left it empty for the weight. So anyway, it did work. But so I got to talking with the guys, and I said, you know, guys, I don't know what we're going to do. What do you want to say? Well, Tim Riley. Oh, and you're going to say what happened to the engine? Well, we had some people come up and tell us that they heard some awfully high downshifts. So it was not an engine problem per se. I think most of our engine problems were pilot error. He said we talked about it, couldn't figure it out. And we knew we couldn't go back to Rippey's, so I said, well, I'll take it back and put it in a bag out back or something. And all of a sudden Riley said, well, Tim Riley, who used to work here, he said, why don't you bring it over to my shop? And before we knew it, we started getting calls for volunteer work and people donating, and Jim Milstead donated brakes and all kinds of people. And so Tim said he had a shop. He said it's out in the hills of Kentucky, and we didn't know that when it rained, the water would be 2 inches deep and people had blisters as big as you can imagine. But we decided we'd take it there and it'd be kind of centralized, and shoot, you know, Bowling Green was a pretty neat place anyway. So we did it the Kentucky way, and this is the resurrection of the car. Notice all the custom tools. Everything off of it and put everything new. We had help from Graham from Lincoln Felton. He got to pick up the bits and pieces. We were missing a rod bolt for a while. one high-tech shop, folks.
Y'all come back now here.
We wanted a complete change, and white wasn't going to be good enough anymore. I turned loose my pinstriper and said, I want this thing to look like no other race car. Some of you remember John Lingenfelter? Carrie Lingenfelter? Still gets me. Well, we promised our sponsor we'd let him drive it if he'd chip in to help us build it. So at Dearborn Avenue, or Michigan Avenue, Dearborn, we let him drive it. 5 o'clock rush hour traffic. He took this down and revved off the local Ford dealer. And almost exactly 2 months later, the car came out like this.
The other front row sitter as well, Bill Cooper. He's had engine problems all week. Prior to qualifying, only 2 practice laps, but that didn't stop Bill from putting the car on the front row. Bill, not much practice time. How's the car set up for today's event?
Well, I think we're pretty good at the Les Stanford Chevrolet. Boy, we've had a difficult weekend with all the problems we've had. As you mentioned, we've only done a couple of laps. I haven't been here in about 4 years, but it seems like the track came back. But with all the guys at Les Stanford helping us, and Butronics, Napa, and Anchor Bay Packing, we've had everybody come out of the woodwork to come down here and help us, and I think we've got a good chance of doing well. They really...
And look at that, there's the leaders coming into turn 8 trying to work Beiheimer. See, you see a car limping and spewing parts doors, that's got to be just a bit spooky.
Yeah, it scares you because that tire's shredding up and the wheels rubbing on the ground so pieces of steel.
One of the things I realized was after we put together our own car and built all of our own stuff and did everything ourselves, the team became a real team. And instead of hiring someone else to do it, we had the pride in the car now. And even our driver
now
had
trying
pride
to
in the
close
car.
back in. Looks like he has a little bit on Cooper.
And as you can see, it was pretty doggone successful for an old 1987
here into turn 10, completing another lap here. Whoa, big power slide by Bobby.
Well, I would just said I saw Archer really working the car really hard in turn 2, and how he's working it really hard up there in turn 10. But he is on the prowl, if you will, right now. He's trying to chase down Cooper.
On the prowl in a Viper, if you will.
There you go. He's been up on the curbing, come on the pit straight away, and again right there. I think we might have an understeer problem. That car's pushing out on him, and look right now, it's allowed Cooper up the inside. Boy, you don't want to touch
This
it.
is mid-Ohio, and we had some problems with our race engine, and we had a spare engine in the trailer that belonged to my car.
Yeah, and maybe
and I brought it just in case we needed some parts. Well, they talked me into putting it in the car. He qualified outside the pole. And this is...
also helped. Oh, look at this! Sharp left it open, locked it up.
This is what he was able to do with one of our Street Skinner LT5 engines in competition.
The Corvette might have a run up the straightaway this time.
Now let's see, and well, he's thinking about it, moves over. Boy, just sort of wiggling around, darting. And
the only problem was we were running temperatures of 280 degrees.
Might be running hot. We haven't heard any indication, but he sure seems to be running out from underneath the Viper every chance. Oh, here it goes.
Let go.
Look at that, right out the exhaust pipe. That is not what you want to see. That's a blown motor.
Boy, and comprehensive at that. And we've been talking about the fact that they're waiting for the new vet to get here, and they continue to try and make do with some older equipment. Well, again, look at that. It's dumping a lot of stuff onto the track. That's a motor that they had to replace the motor before the race anyway with no time on it. And let's watch this, Doris. Just full throttle, say bye.
Yeah, it just blew big time. And that what you saw coming out was, in fact, steam from the radiator. So this has been running hot for quite a while, I guess, and that's why he was driving those weird lines. That's a completely blown up car there.
I can see it from a little different angle here, and it has just comprehensively let go. Not at all.
Despite having a few setbacks, we had some successes also.
Oh, and he locks up the back.
Boy, he was on the outside of the racetrack. He's still locked up. It's not over with yet. Here comes Archer to the outside.
Big save by Cooper. Archer swings wide. They cut. Oh, and here comes Upton. 3 abreast under the bridge.
They're still hitting all 3 just did.
And up to the inside line might just pay off. Now the question is horsepower. Can he hold it? There's the white flag. Boy, coming big time going into the last lap. Upton uses traffic nicely as a pick and holds on.
You better use wide BMWs where
front, Upton exit. Cooper gets a strong exit as well. Archer actually falling back a little bit. And Cooper is dropping the hammer.
Here comes the Corvette power. BMW M3's going to have better brakes at the end. But the Corvette, here it comes. It's going to have a big top end. Sherman moves to the inside, protects the line.
Whoa, he drifted over a little bit, and Cooper trying to go with him. A beautiful, you said a wide BMW, and that's what Sherman developed in about 500 feet of racetrack.
Yeah, he kind of wheeled back and forth.
Not at all.
Bill Cooper slipping and sliding those last few laps. It had to be exciting.
Oh boy, I hope it was for the folks. It was sort of hard work for the 3 of us, but I guess Bobby came out in the worst end of it. But Les Stanford Chevrolet, Corvette King did wonderful here. We're happy. We finished the end. We have an overheating problem. I want to thank Bertronics, Napa, Anchor Bay Packing. It's just great to be here after some of the bad luck we've had.
He was running that different line, trying to keep that bed cool during the whole.
We were leading the points at that point in the season, halfway through. That was the most successful run of a ZR-1 in international racing history. It wasn't easy racing an engine that's never been tested and used for racing before, and we learned an awful lot about it. So if you want to know any of the things that we encountered, give me outside or here later. Tell you some of the unique things, but we did have lots of podiums. We did have, we didn't have any wins, but we had podiums, seconds and thirds, pole positions. And among 65 teams that year, we finished 4th, or 5th, I guess. So all of a sudden, we get a phone call, and General Motors wants to know why we're not racing the new Corvette. And I said, well, we would do that if we had factory support, unlike Le Mans. And they said, well, what would you need? And I said, well, first of all, we need a car to go racing. So we worked out the fact that we needed some special chassis kits made over here at Bowling Green that we could start out with to make our new race car. Our sponsors, now that they had the bug, decided that they wanted to not only participate, but they wanted the best built race car in all of World Challenge history. And we agreed, and so they built us some chassis, and these chassis had a driveline and basic suspension. You'll see a picture of it here. They also were not coated in any way, so we had no CAD plating on the frame or anything. We made 20 kits, 1 and 20 were ours because it was our idea. That's how the kits came, and they were $20,000. They sold out in 2 weeks. They did another 20 run, and they sold those out. General Motors had never done that before, build a kit like that. So here's the build, the state-of-the-art build of a Corvette C5 when nothing but the best counts. agreement with General Motors was that we would share engineering with them, as well as engine modifications and suspension problems that we might encounter, because they were going to develop some new project called a Z06. And they took some of our cylinder head information, and we ran into the balancer spin problems and chain tensioner problems, all of which caused us to lose races. But we developed a much stronger car for production. We brought our painter back from California back to the Stanford paint booth in Michigan for a weekend, and this is what he did. We quickly became a media favorite. They loved the colors, they loved all the designs, especially when we ended up on the podium and now finally winning races.
Today's spotlight is on the beautiful Corvette C5 driven by Bill Cooper. Bill, I understand that this car actually arrived from General Motors SPO as a kit.
Yes, that's true. The car came in just in kit form, and we've spent time, probably the last 6 months, putting it together at Sports Fab in Milford, Michigan.
Now, the heart of every Corvette is the motor. I understand it's virtually a stock 350.
Yes, basically the rules only allow us to have a stock engine. It's a 350 putting out approximately 400 horsepower.
There are some aerodynamic panels on here from a manufacturer.
Right. Part of the kit, we had a front air dam put in, we have a little spoiler in the rear, and we have some side plates on the car, but it might be offered for the street maybe next year, but it's subtle aerodynamic features.
Tell us about the brakes.
Brakes are wonderful on this car. We have basically taken the stock front calipers of the Corvette and put them on the rear, and we've upgraded the fronts to be Alcon, and the car really stops well.
Well, Bill, it seems to be working. They qualified 4th overall, and even more important, they're faster than all the Corvettes here in Grand Rapids.
To round one of the 2000 season.
This was also a terrific season.
The top competitors, the different types of cars, Grand Touring cars, returning to provide in-race commentary again this year.
Coming back of the standing start, which has been used in Europe.
His primary goal is to bring you inside the cockpit for action like this.
Still smoking like hell, Michael's car is, and he's puking out oil everywhere, and I don't think he knows it. He's off the road, he's in the bank. Oh shit, he's nearly going to hit me nose. I think I just missed him, he did a triple somersault. I told you to stop him. His somersault nearly hit the back of my car.
Guest qualifying was the less Stanford Chevy Corvette C5 of Bill Cooper, but pole came with a price.
It was a little frustrating in that we only got one lap in before a car that had spun essentially put a sack of tires in the road, and I couldn't avoid it, so we got a little front end damage and couldn't continue the qualifying session. So the car is awesome. It's great to be on the pole.
So here's how they'll start the first round of the 2000 season, and a look at the...
In pretty good shape, so folks, sit back and enjoy the first standing start in World Challenge history, the first standing start in North America since 1998. This is going to be fun.
David Sharp, good start. David Sharp got a great start. Gets by Cooper on the start and will take the lead in turn one.
That's that Porsche we were talking about with that great traction at the back. That was, whoa, number 14. Rob, pretty significantly.
Yeah, and they've been collected by a couple other cars. One of those cars was the
leader, and he is looking for the green. He brought him up They are side by side into the first turn. Sharp's inside line pays off.
Yeah, Cooper was really wanting to get going there. He tried the outside line and got alongside, but not good enough. But here he comes up the inside. This is a tight corner to the right. Look out. Oh, I can't believe he made that stick down there. That was a good move. I think Sharp gave him a lot of room, though.
I think so, too. Big wiggle from Sharp right there. And Bobby Archer trying to take advantage. Sharp looks like he's protecting a little bit. It's a real high-speed kick, and you're braking all the way into this corner, aren't you?
Yeah, this infield is quite slippery, and it makes it worse when guys get off on the dirt and drag it across the racetrack. And there's been races before this race today, so it's a bit slippery in there. Plus, these guys are on their first hot lap, cold tires.
See?
Well, I wait to the banking now. This next corner, you don't want to blow. It goes right under right when I said it. But let's see what happens. Porsche spins from the outside, no grip. And it's going to hit.
Oh, that's Drendel in the Ferrari.
Big hit, too. It took
Scratch one Ferrari.
That car, a brand new car, is pretty used up now.
Out wide, no grip. Hook slid right across. Meanwhile, Cooper, last time through the chicane, back up onto the banking. And Bill Cooper is going to add to his career wins. He's got 5. He's looking at number 6 one more time now through the north banking.
Boy, I tell you what, he went through the chicane awful hard. He's running hard now. There's your win right now for the winner. We'll look back to second. That was the big crash back there.
Very happy crew for the Pirate Racing team.
Look.
It was Bill Cooper who put in a rocket lap early on, a 1 minute 44.515 in the Les Stanford Vet, and took the early pole. Look at his unique line down into the carousel. Well, Darcy, that means this could be a 41-course meal here. We're going to show you the BMW starting grid. 41 cars. James Falcone is unable to take the green. Petey Cunningham with the pole. Bill Cooper, of course, alongside in that front row. Row 2, Michael Lotti in the champion Audi S4 and John Heinersey in the Chevrolet Corvette. We'll be getting some great views from Bill Cooper, of course, one of the all-time greats at World Challenge competition. Now the officials get out of the way.
You're also going to notice a couple cars back is a familiar face. We had the old car in this race also.
Red lights are on.
His job was to block the Viper.
And there's the
Look at
start. Oh, big move by the Audi. Cooper covers nicely.
Well, you heard Peter Cunningham say that the track was a bit greasy. It was appropriate. They started on the drag strip right then.
Nice move by Sharp from 5th into 2nd, and of course that big Porsche motor hanging right on top of those rear wheels. Pretty good grip.
Yeah, good grip there.
Now we go to the front, and Peter Cunningham putting some pressure on Cooper, making the move to the inside, down into turn 1. Cooper the outside line, a little bit better speed into 1 and up the hill, and he holds it off.
That was a brave move by Peter, but quite honestly, Cooper with the outside line runs more miles per hour. Gets that job. The better of those 3 cars at the back are. I think the Corvette is probably... Oh, big crash.
Peter Kitchak.
Kitchak with a big flip again in that Porsche. It's the second time this year he's been upside down. Big hit, I think.
Welcome back to Sears Point, and we have a huge battle unfolding for 5th spot. That's Mark Wolokachuk in Bill Cooper's old Corvette. Then it is Bell, then Archer, and they're lock up, and Bell takes advantage, Dorf.
Wolokachuk blocked the rear tires up. There goes the inside, takes that away. Also, Archer has a look at it, but there's no room to pass, not through here anyway.
We're going to go on board for a replay, on board with Bell.
Watch the Corvette, gets in too deep, can't turn in. Bell sees it, seizes the opportunity, drives to the inside, and right the position taken away. Good job, I did.
There aren't very many series where you can really go out and race against your competition in what we call the high sport market. And you look at the cars that are running here in World Challenge, and they're cars that all fit right in that high sport market. So that's what we like about the series.
It really is a great opportunity to improve the breed of the car and the engine and all the drivetrain.
We take it outside of the limits that they ever designed it, and then they have to look at what's coming up at the limits of what they're designing and building, and then some of that information gets passed on, and it ends up being in like the Z06.
Corvette customers are the best in the world. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of cars out there, and it seems like every one of the customers is a great enthusiast, so it's always fun to work around them.
Now we look forward to the rest of the forums to come at each of the events. We have a huge battle for 6, and one of them is this Corvette of Mark Wolokachuk. Here comes Archer, and into 7, more brake smoke!
Wow, we did it again. Same kind of problem.
Walkinshaw spins this time, got in there, turned 712 deep. He's had rear brake bias. That means the rear brakes are locking up and it turns the car. This time it turned it completely around. And I think that was all totally set up by that man right there, Archer, who watched it happen the lap before. He knew he was weak in that area.
Well, he kept pushing and pushing until it paid off. That's something of a specialty with Bobby Archer. Here's another look at it, George.
Now watch the Corvette's right rear wheel. Watch, see it locking up right there? Archer sees it locking up. He turns to the inside. Round the Corvette goes. Now he's either got too much rear brake bias or maybe the tires are getting thin.
Bobby Archer took him in deep. I mean, Archer was a good 20 feet off the apex. Bobby knew exactly what he was doing.
We had
Here's
a lot of
Osborne
fun
coming
with
out
Bobby
of the
Archer
carousel.
and
It
his
starts back
Viper.
here.
A lot of fun. We got to be good
Big
friends.
slide. He probably has run off the rear tires, Greg. The back end slid, you saw it there. Now he's going to try to defend by going too deep in the brake zone. Archer's a cagey over there. Watch here. Watch. Turns to the right. Simply sees the smoke. When he passed.
We are back at Sears Point on board with Bill Cooper once again as he is perhaps headed toward another checkered flag. It has been a great weekend for Bill. Obviously qualifying outside of the front row and at the same time then leading from the get-go and continues to do so in that Les Stanford Chevrolet Corvette that he has been instrumental, not just driving, but the top five. It's elating to hear that from your crew that you might be back on the point lead, but Bill Cooper, second win of the year. We'll be back to visit with him right after this.
Deserved this the last race. We got taken out and we were sort of frustrated, had a lot of work to do, but we came back strong.
Everyone thought time management would be an issue today with the caution periods. Did that help out for you, Bill?
Oh, I'm sure it did. Actually, my tires weren't too bad, although without any wings in the car, I have to push a little harder in the fast stuff. But my engine temps and oil temps were real high, and I was really sort of watching them and gearing my speed by that.
Well, another win for the Vet puts them right in the hunt for the championship, guys. It's going to be great to watch the season progress and see if Bill Cooper can pull it off.
Well, he certainly proved.
Well, again, we were highly successful in 2000, and we had a lot of fun. We shared a lot of information with the GM engineering departments, and our sponsors were pretty happy. We wanted to make sure we didn't all work hard, and we had a little fun at the end of this season. And there was a certain black Porsche that had hit us twice. And because of that, when we went into the last race and realized that we were going to be fifth in points no matter what, whether we didn't start or whether we won the race, we went over to Bobby, who was starting third. We were second, and the Kitchak was first. We asked him if he'd trade the championship for a win. He said, of course. So his job was to hold the field back. And what you're going to see is what I think was one of the highlights of my career. It was a lot of fun. It couldn't have happened to a better guy. So
Very unsatisfactory with the handling of his car this weekend, and this morning they found they had a differential that was broken in the car, so they changed it. The problem is you typically set the car around the handling problem, so he's unsure how the car will handle in the race today.
now this is known as a brake check, what you're about to see, and that's when the leader of the race slows down at the last minute and makes everybody slam on their brakes because they can't pass him. There it is again, and that's illegal. That was Mr. Kitchak. Now Dorsey Schrader is going to come up. He was supposed to let us through because he wasn't competing in the series, just this race, but he forgot going into this turn.
They're in the final corner.
And you got to get a good start here because there's a long run to turn one. You can make some passes
This
here.
was the last race of the season.
On the stair, look at Derek Bell just trying to get a jump, but that's a bit premature. There he goes again.
He jumps out early. That's a no-no. There's the green. And this championship is underway. 25 laps to determine the champion. And Kitchak leads. Cooper second. Biscopon. Oh, and Cooper gets into Kitchak.
Oh, God, I know how that feels.
Oh, and that red light coming on generally means the engine stalled, but he's in some deep gravel anyway. Out of that first turn, and they call it the Andretti hairpin there, and it got around. Let's go back and look at the replay.
Well, here comes Cooper looking the inside and thinks different of it. Hits, just drills Kitchak and puts him out into the gravel trap. That's very deep gravel.
Bill was a 23-year instructor of terrace driving techniques at Van Dorn.
Here comes Cooper.
No denying that one.
He was a little right, I mean, it's almost like he moved right into him, didn't it?
look here from Biscuit's car, and I look up ahead of you there. Cooper looks to the inside, but then he gives up on it, turns back to the right. And boy, I don't know.
Wow! Give the Cooper to the ball.
Going to be up on the outside.
Go protest immediately. Immediately. There's a plain, flat hit in the back from Cooper. Very, very intentional.
And that SCCA might be giving him his laps back.
We knew we were in trouble when SCCA gave him his 3 laps back that he sat in the sand.
They're going to try to put him back.
Those of you that race know you never get laps back. And if you don't cross the line, you don't get it. Well, they gave it because he was their favorite to win. We found out later. And that's why he had dominated the seasons to this point. We weren't done yet. I realized that if we could just get him to lead, the Viper to lead a lap, he'd get a point. So Danny Killemeyer was next to us, and he was Heinrich's crew chief. So I tell him, let the Viper lead a lap. Which happened, and when we all got said and done, Kitchak came up through the field to 4th, and the Viper finished 3rd, and as you just read, the Archer Viper won the series by 1 point. As you can tell, we had a lot of team members, a lot of enthusiasts, a lot of supporters, a lot of food. Getting in trouble. That little boy broke his leg and still made it to our race, so we gave him a team shirt. My buddy. Some of you have seen the car on display here in the museum this weekend. If you take a look at the wheels, you'll notice we left those ones with blue paint from that encounter down the hill just for this display. had a little fun with our Viper guys. Had a special Calvin made up for his rig. All right, Brock, you can turn it down just a little bit if you would. A lot of you are going to ask me a question, and I'll give you the answer ahead of time. Why did we quit racing? We quit racing when the SCCA did what they had done in the past, and that was they handicapped us to where we were no longer competitive. We came to race for first place, not for third or fourth, and that's what they put us at. So we decided at the time that it'd be better. We did go race several races at our sponsor's request in 01, but in development of the LS6 engine, we encountered some problems, so we didn't do too well. But it was one heck of a run while we did it. We had an awful lot of support. I can't thank everybody enough. And I want to thank you guys for all coming in today. I'll be around for questions here. If you want to go out and see the new 2010 stuff, it's out there, I believe, for another hour and a half. But anyway, if we can bring the lights up, and if anybody's got any questions, be happy to answer them. Ron.
In your research on the LT5, what was your biggest challenges and limitations you ran into when you raced the LT5?
Well, the LT5 did have an inherent problem that they even had trouble with in production engines, and that was oil breathing and oil consumption. And there is quite an elaborate breather structure underneath the plenum of your LT5. At one race, we put a hose down the jug to the bottom and we ran it over to the dipstick tube, took the dipstick and threw it away, put the hose on there and put a clamp on it. We ran a switch into the dash and had a big blue rubber thing on it. And every time Cooper would come by, we'd look at that jug, and when it got about half full, we'd turn the switch on and it'd pump the oil back down inside the crankcase. Now you guys that run your cars fairly high, high RPM would be shocked if you could just pull your plenum immediately thereafter and see how much oil is inside that plenum. It's a problem on production cars. It's one they didn't altogether solve. In fact, in development, they have a picture that I've seen at Mercruiser, the engine on the dyno, and they had these clear tubes coming up from the breathers, and they had oil like up 3 feet high. So that was definitely a problem. But like I said, most of the problems that we encountered with the engine were human error in various ways. No one had done to the LT5. Tommy Morrison a little bit, Ken Baker a little bit, but nobody had actually taken it out and campaigned it full time like we did. And therefore, we learned that it does overheat. It requires an awful lot of cooling. We found out that there were problems with the transmission. There was, variable instances of problems, but they weren't all related to any one thing. But we did encounter that breather problem. Any other questions? The C5 that we were developing, that was a very interesting car. We found out that if we bumped the rev limiter, this balancer spun off the crankshaft. And a little more in research, we found out that for the first time in a long time, Chevrolet had actually put a balancer on without a keyway. So it was nothing to stop it really from twisting it when it met the requirements that it needed. So we keyed our crankshafts, and we found out later that General Motors had made some different adjustments. We also found that the timing chain tensioners were subject to failure. And that was what took us out of Sebring in 01. So we went through a development process. Like I said, the ZR-1 in 99 was leading the points halfway through the season, and the next 5 races were C5. And I don't know if we finished one on the lead lap that season, so it was pretty tough.
Is your friend with the Porsche still racing?
I have to pick on Mr. Kitchak because this guy was so arrogant, it was pathetic. He would show up with goggles on, like the old biplane pilots, to the drivers' meetings, and he'd wear these funny things, and he was just a show-off, and this car that he had was so illegal, it was pathetic. But SCCA was letting him run it this last year. Well, he could spin, and the whole field could pass him, and he'd still come back and win the race. Well, that's not supposed to be. The cars are supposed to be pretty equal. And of course, depending on the course, a tight course would favor the Porsches, a bigger course might favor the Viper and the Corvette. But there were 8 of us that could win any given race. Well, when Kitchak got to the point that he was always going to be on the pole and always going to win the race, I took exception to that, especially after the brake check. And as you saw, I don't know how if you understood that, but as the pole sitter comes to the line, no one can pass the pole sitter. So he gets up to the line and he lets off the gas and slows down just when everybody else is expected to take off. So Bobby had to hit his brakes and slow down or go to the back of the field. And of course we ran into Bobby and everybody ran into us and everybody got in a big mess. But that was the kind of antics that our boys with the Porsche were doing. When the next year came around, he took the 993, I'm not real sure what Porsches were, but I think it was a 993, one of the newer ones, and he rolled it 3 times that season because the car wasn't as dominant as he thought he was. So that's why you heard him say, that's the second time he's been over this season. So he tried, but he never won another race, he never had another pole. I hope he quit racing. Anything else? Again, I want to thank you guys for all coming. I'm going to go outside in the lobby for a while if you have any other questions, anything you want to ask. And I think there's some 2010 stuff out there for viewing that's going to be there till 3:30. And then we're going to eat tonight. Thanks again for coming.